Let's see how to use manual partitioning during Ubuntu installation. So here I'm going to check these boxes, then click on Next, and here we get two options: erase disk and install Ubuntu, or manual installation. This is what we're going to do in this video. So let's click on Next, and as you can see, this is the size of my disk. I have about 280 gigabytes. And we're going to create here a few partitions so that our Ubuntu system works correctly. If the disk that you're going to install Ubuntu on already has partitions, you might install Ubuntu besides them, but this is not what I'm going to do in this video. In this video, I'm going to use all of the disk space for Ubuntu. So the first thing you might want to do, in case you do have other partitions, is click here on the name of the disk itself, then click on New Partition Table. So just so I can show you, let me quickly create here a new partition. Okay, so I have a few partitions here, and the first step we're going to do is click on the disk itself here. Then I'm going to click on New Partition Table. And we get a warning that creating a new partition table on an entire device will remove all of its current partitions. So you can definitely do that, but be aware that it will completely remove all of the partitions that you currently have. And I'm going to click on OK. And now we have a clean slate. So the first partition, the one that we're going to start with, is the one that's known as EFI System Partition, or ESP for short. This is basically like a table of content for our system. This helps the system know where all of the other partitions located. So to create it, I'm going to click here where it says free space. Then I'm going to click here, device for bootloader installation. And if you have more than one disk, you will see more than one option here. I only have one disk, so this is the option that I'm going to choose. And we can see that a new partition was created. We can see that the size allocated to this partition is a bit more than 1 gigabyte. We can see that the type is FAT32, and we can see that the mount point is boot EFI. This partition is extremely important, and you might not even be able to boot up your system if you don't have it. Let's move on to the next partition. So I'm going to click on free space, and now I'm going to click here on the plus icon to create the new partition. Now, for many years during the Ubuntu installation, we had to create a swap partition, this option here. Now, you might not necessarily need it anymore. Modern versions of Ubuntu use a swap file. So a dedicated swap partition is not necessarily needed anymore. You can definitely create one, and if you do, allocate about, I don't know, maybe 3 to 5 gigabytes, but it's probably only going to be useful if you plan to use hibernation extensively. For most people, the swap partition isn't really needed anymore, so I'm not going to create one. What we are going to create is an ext4 partition. This is the primary file system for Ubuntu, for Linux in general, and this is where our actual files will reside. Now, as for the mount point, I'm going to choose /, which is basically the root of the system. So the operating system itself will be created on this partition. Now, how much size do we want to allocate to this partition? This is a good question, and it really boils down to whether or not you want to create a separate home partition. If you plan, for example, to distro hop, having a separate home partition will be very, very useful. But if you want to keep things simple, you can definitely only have one partition. So if you are going to go with a single partition, you need to allocate all of the remaining disk space to this new partition. And if this is the case, you're simply going to click OK. So in this case, we're only going to have two partitions: the EFI system partition and a single unified partition for all of our files, system files and user files. If, on the other hand, you prefer to have the separation, let me remove this partition by clicking here on the minus icon, then we can create two different partitions. Let's start by creating the first one. So once again, I'm going to click on the plus icon, and let's start with the root partition. So the mount point is going to be /, and you need to allocate at least 50 gigabytes to the root partition. This is where the operating system itself will be installed. I would say that the bare minimum is at least 50 gigabytes. But there are a lot of files and programs that expect to work from the root folder. So if, for example, you're going to have a lot of Docker containers or other development-related tasks, it might be a good idea to allocate more. As a rule of thumb, if you have the disk space, I would suggest to allocate about 100 to 120 gigabytes to the root partition. So for this demonstration, let's say that I'm going to allocate 100 gigabytes. Then we can click on OK. And we still have 182 gigabytes that aren't allocated yet. So let's choose this free space. And once again, I'm going to click on the plus icon. And the rest of the disk space is going to be allocated to our home partition. So here the mount point is going to be /home. And let's click on OK. And this is how it's going to look like if you want a separate root partition and a separate home partition. Once you are done, click on Next. Provide your name, your computer's name, your username, and your password. Then click on Next, choose your time zone, and the installation will start. When the installation is done, you will have your computer set up with the partitions you configured.